So, hello everyone. My name is Laura O'Connor and I'm the chair for the Information Management Group. Thank you both so much for coming along. This is our second talk of the MSIG series. I'm just hearing some feedback there. Thank you. So welcome to our second talk of the DigITea series, which is very exciting. So for today, I would like to introduce our speaker, Tom Flynn. So delighted to have him along today. Tom is a digital heritage consultant and the founder and editor of the Spatial Heritage Review, which is an amazing newsletter. If you can sign up for it online, it's really interesting work he's doing. So through his consultancy, Tom assists the Cultural Heritage Organisation in exploring 3D digitalisation, online publishing, open access, storytelling, and interoperability. He also offers workshops on practical 3D capture using photogrammetry and produces 3D assets in various projects. So some of you may already know Tom from his amazing work as Cultural Heritage Lead at Sketchfab, where he played a pivotal role in integrating 3D models in museum and archive collections worldwide. And one of my favorite facts about him is he also co-founded museuminabox.org, which is an initiative focused on interactive museum experiences. So today, Tom will be discussing enabling interoperable cultural 3D data with IIIF, exploring how the International Image Interoperability Framework is being extended to support 3D data, enhancing accessibility and interoperability in digital heritage. So please join me in welcoming Tom Flynn. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks, Cara. I'll share in the chat now a link to the slides from my presentation if people want to follow along, because there'll be links within the slides that you can click off to as we go or later. Should just share my screen and then get going. Should also say thank you very much for having me along. It's nice to meet a new group. How's that looking for everyone?
Yep, good.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'll be talking today about enabling interoperable, cultural 3D data, but it could be any 3D data really with IIIF. And there's a link there, and I'll make sure to sort of share that again, a link to the community group of which I am a co-chair in the presentation that you can check out for more information about the group as well. And then there's some links about me too. I've shared that in the chat, so you don't need to see the link to the slides again. I thought I'd just give you a quick idea about who I am. So as Laura was saying, I'm a consultant right now. I co-chair in a voluntary role the IIIF 3D community group, and I'll explain a bit about what that is a bit later. I run a newsletter and a LinkedIn group all about 3D spatial technology related to cultural heritage. I'm a visiting fellow at Bournemouth University, and I co-authored something called glam3d.org, which is a white paper about 3D digitization, copyright and open access that I authored with some folks from NYU. And then previously I worked at Sketchfab and Museum in a Box and the British Museum as well. And I'm based down in Bournemouth in the UK. So before I get into what IIIF is and why I think it's so great and why everyone should be interested in it, I thought I'd just share a couple of slides from a presentation that I gave at something called Euromed 2024 in Cyprus. It's just really to sort of illustrate kind of, well, why are we interested in 3D and interoperability and whatever that means as well. And so for me, I kind of have this like long-term dream that at some point there will be kind of a globally representative library of openly licensed, well-optimized cultural heritage 3D assets powering online mobile-first storytelling experiences that educate and delight audiences with cultural and historical knowledge, all underpinned by interlinked archives of high-quality data sets sustainably stored for future generations. So in this statement, I kind of tried to combine all these sort of different elements that I see as kind of building blocks into kind of what a possible future for digital cultural heritage assets in 3D might kind of look like or feel like or sound like. So in a kind of simpler sort of way, in this slide, you kind of read from the pink, the bottom line up, is as heritage or GLAM, galleries, libraries, archives, museums, archaeologists, and scientists produce 3D data sets. If they are well documented and well archived, these data sets can underpin accessible libraries of openly licensed and interoperable 3D data. So there's a difference there between I have data stored on my local hard drive to an accessible library with clear licensing that is available for people to use. And if that's sort of taken care of, then those libraries of assets can power engaging and delightful 3D experiences for audiences. So my probably main focus or main interest is with the widest possible audience for cultural heritage 3D data. Obviously, archaeologists, academics, scientists are kind of producers and a main audience for 3D data, but you can kind of expand that beyond to museum audiences, educational audiences of any age, and in general, the general public as well, because I think culture and heritage is a fairly universal interest. So to introduce the IIIF consortium, if you're not familiar with them, the consortium with IIIF stands for the International Image Interoperability Framework, which is a mouthful, and that's why people often abbreviate it to IIIF. And you can find out more at iiif.io. But the consortium, a group of 11 institutions, was founded in 2015 and now comprises of 69 members. The wider community of contributors and folks using the IIIF framework is much more than that, but the consortium currently comprises 69 members from organizations across the globe, and it's led in general by the goals of providing rich access to digitized data. So that I bolded rich there, the idea that it's not simply a piece of data on a page, but it's something more than just presenting a digital asset. They also define and maintain the application programming interfaces, also known as APIs, which enable the rich access, and we'll look at that in a little bit, as well as developing, cultivating, and documenting related viewing technologies. So there's kind of an extra component of folks who are developing viewing technologies that plug into the IIIF framework and allow you to mix, remix, and access data in interesting ways. So it's very much a community of people. The photo in the background here is from the IIIF conference, which happened last week in Leeds in the UK. It's in a different city each year. And one thing I also like is that the IIIF community and what it does is a very practical application of FAIR principles. The data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So it's kind of not just based in kind of some general interest in technology, but it's really about kind of giving people access to data, but also the related stories, narrative, history of subjects in engaging ways. This was a slide that I grabbed just from the introductory presentation from last week's conference, just to give you an idea of kind of, this is just new consortium members around the world. So you can see that it's very much kind of a very big community, folks from not everywhere, but a lot of different places around the globe, either interested in the subject or contributing to the projects. As a practical demonstration of, what does interoperability enable, there's a very nice kind of demonstration here from the Bibliothèque Virtuelle des Manuscrits Médiévaux, if I'm pronouncing that properly. But what you're seeing kind of in the GIF on the right there is that manuscripts, 15th century manuscripts, at some point in history had their illustrations snipped out by some naughty person. And the manuscripts are held at one organization, the Bibliothèque virtuelle des manuscrits médiévaux, and the illustrations themselves, the physical pieces of paper, are held at the Bibliothèque nationale de France. And both of these organizations have digitized these assets that are related but in different physical locations, and they have published those data sets online. And not just that, they've used the IIIF framework, the standard, to bring them back together virtually. So this, you can click that link and kind of try it out yourself. It's pulling data from essentially 2 different web servers and combining it in this 3D viewer. So going back to the idea of viewer technologies, there's a viewer technology that's kind of requesting data from 2 sources and recombining them in one experience. And what that looks like in kind of a technical level, and you can learn more about this on the IIIF website, is if I wonder if I can go. I was hoping I could get a laser pointer, but I can't. On the left, let's go from left to right, there's the image server. So that's where the images, so for the manuscripts and the illustrations, are saved somewhere. And also there's a metadata source, which is a kind of a often textual record of what the subjects are, the titles, the record number, all the information that tells you what that image is, or a given image is. And the image API requests an image, and this could be part of an image, it could be a particular crop of an image, it could be a black and white version of an image. You can request, you can perform transformations when you request an image. And then the digital object, the image, and the data, it can be combined in something called a manifest, and that's essentially a fancy text file or JSON in JSON format if you're a technical person. And this manifest can then be read by a viewer in a web browser, and that's how the data eventually gets presented. And so there can be different layers of manipulation along the way to present data in different ways for different audiences. Over time, while IIIF primarily was concerned originally with 2D imagery, because this was a very common digitization practice for some time, it's also kept up with improving digitization practices, or expanding the support for different media types. So from 2D to then include audio and visual or temporal content, so video files and audio files. And then also now we're on the verge of having proper support for 3D or spatial content, and that may be just maybe 3D models, but it could also include things like 3D audio or lighting environments and other 3D spatial related content too. In fact, it will do all of those things. So to look a bit at 3D for within the heritage sector, and I'm sure many people in the audience are maybe producing or are working with 3D data already, but for any folks that are fairly new to the idea, this is a slide I've presented a few times. Just a summary, as I can kind of see it, of how 3D data is produced and used. So one big way that 3D is produced is via digitizing collections, and this could be using photogrammetry or LiDAR, structured light, CT scanning, magnetic resonance imaging, digitizing collections in different ways to produce some kind of 3D data. This could be for documentation, conservation, interpretation, monitoring change, but also for access, education, outreach, and to tell stories with that data, to engage people with the narratives associated with subjects that have been digitized. Also, 3D data may be produced through research as again a means of engaging people with findings, or as part of the research that could only be done using 3D technologies, as well as capturing data. Maybe heritage or GLAM organizations are producing 3D models from scratch. So as a 3D illustration, perhaps they're hypothesizing a reconstruction of a particular subject, object, or a place as well. So lots of 3D data being produced all the time. Every sort of week, you can see a new piece of 3D data, whether that's published on LinkedIn or elsewhere. And how is that data often used? Well, probably the biggest destination, or public destination, I should say, for a lot of the 3D heritage data has been for a while sketchfab.com as the de facto publishing platform for 3D data. And as Laura said, that's something I was involved with. And you can see here, this is just a screen grab from yesterday, how this is the cultural heritage category we're looking at, but you can see that there's also some fantasy and creative content mixed amongst, for example, scans of statues and buildings and paintings there. So Sketchfab is great, I think, for what it does. It makes data easily available. It's so easy to upload a 3D file, grab a link, share it with a colleague, embed an interactive 3D experience in a website. And that's, I think, why it's become popular, not just with cultural heritage organizations, but with many other folks as well. So there are challenges and opportunities that the heritage and GLAM community faces. Generally very good at digitizing subjects to a high quality and maybe even presenting individual objects online. In theory, very good at long-term data storage and information authority. What are these subjects? What are they about? Where they come from, provenance, etc. But maybe less good, and this doesn't mean everyone, but in general, less good at authoring scenes and experiences. So something, again, going back to the idea of richer experiences that aren't simply a 3D model that you can spin around on your screen, but building something more engaging, and also maybe less good at exporting 3D and related data beyond the sector. And this is especially true of open access projects, which may have good licensing, for example, but also there's questions around data preparation for different audiences and different use cases. Often I've seen over time that there are relatively few projects or organizations that will be able to capture high quality data, but then have a kind of a workflow, a downstream workflow of preparing that data in different ways, making it usable, practically usable by different audiences beyond the core organizational audience. So there's this opportunity to package up 3D data, the metadata, so what the subject is, the paradata, how is the 3D data captured, things like the object record, interpretation data, license data, packaging all that up for reuse in by third parties. So that might be education, news, film, TV, interactive games, commercial, lots of ways 3D data is used in all of these other industries. And there's maybe an opportunity to connect and make sure that the 3D data travels with its related metadata and information, so that you don't just have a 3D model that whizzes off into education, but with no context, for example. Going back to kind of where we're at sort of today, is that Sketchfab, which, as I mentioned, is a very common way for people to publish their 3D data, was acquired by a company called Epic Games, and is in the process of migrating that platform, closing it down, migrating features and assets to their fab.com marketplace to power their gaming creation ecosystem. And these articles flashing up on the right were taken from October last year, and there was a fair amount of panic around, well, does that mean data's going away? Does that mean things that were created within the Sketchfab platform will be lost? What's going to happen in the coming years? When will it happen? And it's a confirmation that Sketchfab are very good at what it does and enabling certain uses and reuses of 3D data. It's confirmation of a need in the heritage and GLAM community, and maybe academia more widely, for reliable support for 3D data. And that goes from storage through to discovery and interactivity. And IIIF is part of that puzzle. How is the IIIF community contributing? The 3D community on Sketchfab within IIIF is comprised of two groups at the moment. The community group, which has over 400 members in the Slack channel, which was established in 2018, brings people together in a kind of collegiate manner to share work, experience, projects, and to learn from one another. And also the group established the user stories. So a user story is as it sounds, it's a narrative that describes a particular use case for 3D data in this case, and what somebody would want to do with that data. So perhaps I am an educator that wants to access a 3D model and display it with annotated historical content. Maybe I am an academic that wants to bring together 3D models from different communities into a single scene to compare them for my research. And so those user stories are used as a basis, or kind of a way to direct the development of the 3D support within the IIIF framework. And it's been working so far. The group meets once a month. Please do consider joining the group. It's very, very low key. You can join the Slack and join the chat there, or join a call. We have a running notes for each of the calls. And if you're interested in kind of a review of 2025 and plans for 2026, there's a document that we submitted to the consortium that you can check out as well. As I say, so that's a community group that powers the work of the technical specification group, which was established in 2021, who have been drafting updates and additions to the IIIF specification to accommodate 3D. And that meets every 2 weeks online. And some core members are folks from Duke University, the Smithsonian Institution, a group called working on Compact 3D Viewer, and as well as somebody from X3D, part of the Web Consortium, who do a lot more technical work, way over my head sometimes, but it all relates back to, well, how can we make things, and how can we engage people with 3D data? So some examples, and these are sort of some screen grabs from the community call, people showing off from the top left, importing via the IIIF framework a 3D model into Godot, an open source game engine. The next one, top right, the same 3D data viewed in different 3D viewers. Bottom left, a nice demo from Morphosource, and I'll mention them again later, an annotated 3D model. And the nice thing here is that data can be exported and imported into other environments, as opposed to something like Sketchfab, which is a bit more of a locked box in some aspects, where you can't export things like lighting and annotations as easily. And we also we have industry presentations. So Histovery is a well-established augmented reality exhibition producer, and they came to a call and presented some of the work they're doing as well. And then the technical specification group are, the aspiration, and we're very close to it now, is that you have 3D model metadata paradata that can be referenced in a manifest JSON file. So if you imagine in all that text, at some point there's a URL that points to a 3D model that's online, and there's also additional information like a description. Perhaps it's also included different language versions of that description, a title for the subject, the licensing attribution information for that subject, and lots of other information that can then be brought together in a 3D scene in a web browser. So all this data referenced from multiple repositories is annotated into the scene. So that's the process of adding a 3D model into a 3D scene. For IIIF, it's annotated into the scene, but same for audio, a camera, lighting, text. And this, in theory, would be renderable in different 3D viewer environments. It was also good, going back to the question around Sketchfab, it's good having a bunch of folks who are interested in 3D and cultural heritage to band together to kind of knock on the door of larger organizations. So we organized a brief call with folks from Epic Games last November, around the time, if you remember, the press articles were going out that everyone was concerned. We organized a call with them to present some concerns, questions from the group, and to hear directly from the company about what the next steps are, or how, for example, IIIF could ease some of the pain if people start to move their 3D content from one platform to another. So IIIF today. Again, this idea of same content, multiple viewers. The primary developers of 3D viewers at the moment who are involved in the project, and this isn't a complete list, the Smithsonian Voyager developers, the X3D developers, Compact 3D Viewer, and the Morphosource ALF viewers. There are others, but again, these are just a practical illustration of the idea of same data, but actually now it's really being supported by groups who are focused on the development of viewers as opposed to publishing the data itself. And maybe someone on this call also works in this space and they want to add their 3D viewer to this list as well. Last week, the conference in Leeds, and I can recommend clicking through to some of these videos. There's a full playlist of all the videos. I've pulled out some of the 3D demonstrations and workshops, but there's a good section of video from the opening plenary introducing how the IIIF specification is being updated to include 3D. So one of the things it's very a basic addition is that primarily the 2D canvas that images have been annotated into. So what we saw with the manuscripts demo earlier is a 2D canvas. The addition of a third dimension to that canvas necessitated defining a scene which has a vertical, horizontal, and depth axis, in addition to a canvas for 2D content. And there's also this idea of being able to put canvases inside a 3D scene, or putting multiple scenes, nesting them within a scene using the framework. And there's lots of practical illustrations of folks working with 3D and how they're supporting it. Probably the most developed support for IIIF 3D, which hasn't been, the specification, I should say, hasn't been updated and released just yet. That's planned for January 2026 next year, but it's kind of practically usable at the moment. And we are actively, the group, the 3D community and technical specification group, are seeking folks to kick the tires, try out the specification, build manifests, publish 3D data, and see how it looks in different 3D viewers. And we're already finding bugs and things that need to be ironed out. But it's all through practical experimentation that we'll improve and get ready for the specification update in a few months. So you can see, yeah, there's lots of groups already poking at what IIIF and 3D can do. As a practical demonstration, I'm going to click these things and let's see what happens. If I click just this first link, this is a direct link to a JSON file. And so this is, zoom in a wee bit, this is a JSON file, how the text looked. And it kind of, the bits I'll draw your attention to simply are the link to a 3D model here, so a GRB file that is being annotated into a scene. And it's very simple. This is just a 3D model I'm pulling into a scene. So this is all the kind of JSON you need to create a manifest. And what does that look like? How do you go from this into, if you can't tell, I'm not a very technical person. While I do understand what IIIF is, I don't tend to focus on the technical aspects of it. But what does it mean in terms of practical use? So the 3D model is hosted on a server somewhere, and in theory, if we open these links, we should see the same. It'll take a moment to load. The same 3D model is the Smithsonian Voyager. This is a Italian cassone from the Courthole Gallery, a project that I'm involved in. We created this 3D model. This is the X3D 3D viewer. And while this maybe seems kind of fairly straightforward, the fact that you can actually view this in different environments opens up, I think, lots of possibilities for developers and creative folks. Oh, the Morpho source viewer, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, sometimes you might have to refresh. Using data and combining it or reusing it and doing different things with it. There are some other examples we can click through to in a minute or two. But so again, it's the same 3D data in different 3D viewers, and what the opportunity is to then be building on top of these something that's a bit richer. So, for example, annotation hotspots that can kind of describe different aspects of some data, maybe combining different 3D data together to illustrate things, as we saw with the manuscripts. That could be also done with 3D data. Maybe guided tours, taking you to look at different parts of the cassone and explaining kind of what they are and what they mean. This is I should say, a fairly low resolution, or should I say, well optimized 3D file, because if we're publishing online, we don't want to be making our audiences necessarily wait for even 20-30 seconds. So there's a balance between the quality of 3D file and the user experience. But yeah, maybe we want to give a kind of a tour that shows us different aspects, different sides, different views on some data. Can also, if you're in the presentation yourself, the next slide is just a quick kind of example of some manifests in the wild. So we have 3 links here. If I'm gonna click that by accident. I'm gonna open this manifest. Let's just close these windows. Don't close the video call. Here's another manifest hosted on MorphoSource. And if I copy that link, and there are 2 options here. I'm going to use this one, which is it's a demo that lets you paste in a manifest and builds you a URL for each of the different 3D viewers. So I don't know if you can see the first part is a link to the MorphoSource viewer. Let's go and zoom in a little bit. The MorphoSource viewer, the universal viewer is what they're using here, and it's asking what's the manifest, and then a link to the manifest that we played in. And in theory, let's see if I've done this right. That will load a subject from that's hosted. So this 3D model is hosted on MorphoSource. It's a photogram, I believe. Let's see if we can get it to work in Voyager. No, nothing is loaded. Let's see if we can get it to work in the universal viewer hosted on another site. Give it a second to load. That does work. So as I say, it's still a matter of testing. Sometimes it can even be just regular, because we're talking about different servers talking to each other. There's plenty that could go wrong in terms of responses and data availability that could take longer. So you can see it doesn't always work. Let's try one more. URL. See if we get this to work. This should be multiple 3D models in a scene. This might take a little bit longer to load, if it loads at all. I'll open it in another view and see if we've got it working there. Oh, no, unable to load the manifest. Can we get it also on it? So this is a good demonstration of the work that's still to be done. And actually on that note, I will finish my presentation and kindly ask that you consider joining in the fun, joining the groups, whether that's technical or community, to share your 3D work, share your opinions on the work and the needs for or around interoperable data. Maybe even if you're of a technical bent, to build with and test the work in progress specification to figure out why things do and don't work. I can say, for example, the last demo that I tried loading, I know for a fact breaks some 3D viewers because the language label for the description is not EN for English. It includes a NL for Dutch as well, and that's support that needs to be worked into the viewers and will only be, I guess, noticed through testing and folks building. So yeah, please do consider testing and trying things out, because maybe you'll get things to work. And then there's also wider topics again around file formats, licensing, how to publish data, how to optimize data, necessary user features for the 3D viewers that we only learn about as a community by people sharing their own work and what they're doing and why they're doing it as well. So please do come and join us, and I'll finish there, and I'm happy to hang around if anyone's got any questions related to this.
Thank you so much, Tom. That was a fascinating talk on the IIIF framework. We have a couple of questions. I have a question, but I'll tell you what, I'll start with Paul first because I went first last time. So Paul, would you like to ask your question?
Hello. So that's all is obviously focused on outreach and objects. And I get that's the simple use case and sort of building for the future. Sorry, I'm not just turning my camera and I'm obsessed with that one bit of bloody hair. Right. My thought about 3D, because I'm a consultant. I don't work in museum, I work in planning application stuff. So what I'm always looking for with 3D is is it simple enough for a derp like me to use from, say, something like GIS software. So it's taking, the point being, sorry, to take geographically referenced 3D data and give that to, well, firstly, to be able to use that in reporting and explaining stuff and illustrating things, fair enough, but also giving that over to a developer so that that can then go into, say, their management system, so that like BIM 3D CAD standards, for example, that can go to someone just built a road and want to do preservation in situ. No county archaeologist, no inspector is going to say, oh yeah, we'll trust them to not dig into that for whatever they want to do for the next 50 years. But if it's mapped out in 3D and is available in that BIM system, in theory, then you can guarantee by commitment that will be avoided and that will be preserved. So it enables it a lot better, more precisely as well. So that's my use case that I'd like to get to. And on the way there, doing things like being able to say, take a raster with height information encoded. So say you've got features on LiDAR and drop that in 3D into an environment that so a developer can look at it instead of 2 dimensions, because the hardest part about convincing developers anything about archaeology and avoiding things is that it's 3-dimensional. Because they look at a line and go, oh, I'm okay outside that line, right? Schedule monument there, fine, right here, 2 inches away. Yeah, but to be able to, as soon as you give them a model, even though there is a boundary, something in their head just clicks and goes, oh yeah, of course there might be more. So that's kind of what I'm after. And I've got a load of questions about making Python libraries and things like I could do that. But watch this space. If it's possible, I'm happy to start developing something that you could use potentially as a way to export from, say, GIS. But that's what I'll be after.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I think that there's different aspects to, I suppose, that that pipeline. About how data is made available, via something like IIIF. So whether that's geographic data or as you say, CAD data, that all needs to be, I guess, encoded in a way. And we're talking specifically about online experiences here, and made available via a framework. If we were going to follow this along, is anything's possible, I suppose, if you have the development time and the commitment from.
I suppose what to focus down rather than talk strategy of this is that, well, if it's good for a developer to convince them not to do something or to do something, it's you've only got time to do one thing, and that will go to the public as well if that's the thing. Say, hey, look what we did. That's you want that PR win. So it's, the two do go hand in hand, but it would have to be the one thing because you wouldn't have the time to do it twice, I think, or the budget to do it twice. So I suppose the key question there is then, is the standard that's been developed and worked on, is that built to be able to incorporate georeference data?
Yeah, potentially. That's all I can say, because we're at the stage where developers haven't been plugging more and more things into it. But I think being able to the JSON manifests can, for example, for a particular subject, can include a georeference for a particular 3D data orientation, and you can perform transforms on data that you're importing as well. So if you have a known 3D scene, you can import different layers, whether that's a 2D image or mapping it to a 3D surface, or if it's more 3D model. It's all impossible, in theory possible, but I can't say that I'm aware of specific examples of that right now. But that's kind of it could be worth looking at what people have done with IIIF 2D over many years, and the kind of richer experiences that they're and this is have a look at the 2025 conference, have a look at the demos on IIIF.io as well, and that hopefully will give you kind of an indication of how I see kind of the gist of what's happening. What are people doing with the specification? And if you are up for it, sharing your use case and needs with the group, I think would sometimes it's about finding like the right developer who's keen on, oh yeah, that's actually something I'd love to work on, or it can be good to just meet people and talk these things through. But yeah, it's not something I've seen, but I think in theory possible.
Might reach out to the development group then and just ask some questions.
Yeah, do it, please do.
Amazing. Actually, Paul, you might look into Cesium. Cesium is an open source platform for rendering 3D tile data. So it's an open source format. So the platform we're considering as well.
And then Cesium
for georeferencing. Yeah, Cesium is in the CIUM. So yeah, it's a geospatial platform, but for 3D basically.
Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Is there also in terms of what's there now? How is there? Sorry, is the sort of ADS data storage or archival data storage standards, is that something that's even being looked at, or is it a completely separate thing?
For the group, I think there's this kind of like funny gray fuzzy area of like producing and storing data and standards around that, which is slightly different from the framework, which you kind of could, in theory, point at any kind of data if it's presented in the right way. But yeah, that is definitely part of it, I think. And a framework or a standard is only as good as the people, the number of platforms that are supporting it. So that's definitely the work of the community group right now, is to get people interested in the idea of being able to connect say, for example, a platform like ADS with using IIIF to the viewers that can then, engage people with the data, that kind of thing.
And
Katie, oh sorry, Katie, can I bring Katie here because she's with ADS? So she might have some insights. Thank you.
Just to let Paul know that we are exploring the use of IIIF manifests and things and producing them for ADS data. So it's something we're looking at currently.
Amazing.
Watch this space.
Excellent.
Perfect. Thanks very much. We had a question from Dora in the chat. So Tom, you mentioned about servers talking to each other when they refer to click and open the Qtran object. What on average is the highest delays you have experienced? And thanks, Paul, for your question as well.
Theodora, it really depends massively on the size of the 3D file and what's in the 3D file. So you can obviously have the geometry of the 3D file. Maybe the textures are very big. They use a particular file format, a PNG uncompressed versus a JPEG. The speed of the server itself, and kind of what support. I've actually been reading a few articles recently about how AI scraping bots are going around and kind of knocking services as they go around, kind of doing their thing, knocking services offline because typically heritage organizations probably aren't prepared for the volume of traffic. So, the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure will affect how fast something loads, the connections between things, your connection to, the web as well. All of these things can massively affect it, which is why, in my opinion, I've written articles about this. Like, if you're publishing 3D online, it's very, very important to optimize your data as much as possible. There's a general, I would say, not obsession, a rightful pride in high quality, high resolution data within the heritage sector. But this, as you publish larger data in an online context, I think if you're getting up to 500, 600 megabytes, gigabytes of data, you're reducing the practical audience to that can load that on their device, because you don't know, are they on a laptop, are they on a smartphone, what's their connection? So yeah, it's a balance of who you're trying to reach anyway, the audience versus kind of like the audience would dictate how long they'll stick around to load your file. And I think general audiences have a much higher expectation of fast loading than, for example, a researcher who really wants to see a particular file. So yeah, it's a bit of a non-answer, but there are all these factors that I think play into it.
Brilliant. Can I ask a question before we finish the session? So just in relation to cesium there and 3D tile, how do you see the IIIF standards, IIIF, even I get caught up in it, standards fit in alongside with, say, standards like CDOC, CRM and 3D tile? Like, does it fit along? Can it be worked conjunctively, or is it?
Well, something like IIIF is the plumbing. This is where I kind of think of it. It's the plumbing that gets data to different places, and different services like cesium will have support for example, GLB files or a certain subset of 3D files, and then it's about what do they support this protocol. Cesium's been, I think, quite an open platform in terms of connecting to different services. I had lots of good chats with them while I was at Sketchfab, thinking about, well, how can a library like Sketchfab be plugged into, this was before the acquisition by Epic Games, plugged into something like Cesium, but for example, they have tile support in platforms like Unity and Epic Games Unreal Engine as well. So it's a definite possibility, and another kind of like group on our list of folks to bug, to kind of keep them aware of where we're at with the specification. And then so right now there's just not very many people publishing data sets using IIIF. So Morphosource is probably one of the most well-developed platforms. So there's kind of like a platform that has URLs to 3D files that in theory will be around for a long time. But that's just one group, and to then persuade another group to support the IIIF specification, the question is, well, why would we do that if only like 5 people are kind of publishing data? So it's a bit, you have to find the right folks to engage with, and who can see the potential, I suppose, in something like this. And we have, sorry, just one more thing. We have, presented to there's something called the Academy Software Foundation that manages the Open USD working group. So USD is a different file format that's developed by, for example, Apple, NVIDIA, and Pixar, and it comes from a kind of a different industry, but they're looking at similar questions around, if I put this 3D data into this environment, does it look the same as this environment, this environment, this environment? Does it work as expected? Is it reliable? So I think there's, the concept, the idea is sensible, but then practically speaking, there's only so much time, money that's available to make it happen.
Well, no, that was absolutely brilliant. Yeah, always challenges, but we keep moving forward, and that's the great thing about heritage is we keep progressing and being innovative, which is amazing. I was just going to check if anybody else had any questions before I close the session. Oh, well, I'll let you go all for lunch, and my sincere thanks again, Tom, for such a really informative and insightful talk. Really enjoyed that, and I hope this is the start of many discussions between us, our group, and you as well, in terms of 3D data and how to advocate standards across the heritage sector. That'd be amazing. Thank you. So thanks very much, everyone, for coming along. I just want to let you know as well about our next talk. Our next talk is on Tuesday, the 8th of July, which is Oasis Explained, your guide to the UK's Historical Environment Investigation Database, and Nikki Gardlin from ADS will be giving that. I'm just sharing the link in the chat to register for that, so hopefully you can make it. And yes, and Cara, thank you so much. Cara got to me there for sharing that as well. So thank you again, everyone, for coming along, and we'll be sending out the slides and the video afterwards if anybody wants to catch up as well. Thanks again, Tom. Much appreciated for you coming along today.
Thanks for having me. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.